How's it going, everyone? Welcome back. Everyone's having a lovely day. Today, we gather here to talk about our 4-8 Cincinnati Bengals Commander-in-Chief, Zachary Taylor. And I'll be the first one to admit, a couple things. I love bringing in Zach Taylor. I love bringing him in. He was a young coach. He was an open-minded person. I thought he seemed like a chill person. Seemed like he had some great ideas. Let's draft these captains out of the draft, get some leader guys in the locker room. He came out of an excellent Sean McVay-led team in LA. That, again, mastermind, learning under a guy like Sean McVay, had to like that. And he seemed to be obviously a big jump from where he's going from, QB's coach to Bengals head coach and whatnot. But it's like, let's give this guy a try. Very open-minded, very much wanted to see him succeed. Even this season, I was very pro Zach Taylor. Now, I'll be the first to admit, and something I try to do better at, as a sports fan, it's very easy to get emotionally involved in a team where you're like, oh, it's the coach's fault. You micromanage every single little play. It's the coach's fault. It's the coach's fault. It's the coach's fault. I mean, this 60, 70, 80 plays, whatever it is in a game, and, on what your respective sides of the ball, and if you can point out 2 plays in a game that you're upset with, odds are that means you was okay with the other 58. Maybe he's not that bad, right? But that, that can be the thing with micromanaging. So I try to be more mindful of that and not just illuminatingly blaming everything on Zach Taylor. But now here we are, 4-8. Bengals again gonna miss the postseason, and we come in with some undeniable evidence and statistics, just pure facts on the reason Zach Taylor probably has no business being the Bengals head coach next season. And again, I want to be the person that says, hey, and it is, the front office needs to do better. When you're 20 years deep into the Duke Tobin era and you don't have any good first round draft picks to show for it outside of the obvious Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, AJ Green, that can't miss top fivers. When you swing and miss that often, you do look at the front office. But in the Bengals situation, it feels like it's a combination of both right now. Because here's the thing with Zach Taylor. He has now been with this team for 6 seasons. At home, in those 6 seasons, his record is 18-24. In those six seasons, his record against the division is 11-23. In weeks 1 and 2 of the football season, his record is 1-11. Mind you, Bengals Super Bowl run, Bengals AFC Championship appearance, Bengals one of the best seasons you've seen in their history during that stretch, and you still have numbers like this. It kind of reminds me a little bit of what Ryan Day is with Michigan or Ohio State now, with Michigan not being able to beat Michigan. If you can't beat Michigan, now the playoffs are bigger. But if you can't beat Michigan, your chances of a championship are nothing, because you have to get through them to get to the championship game. If you don't get through them, you don't get the championship game. You don't get the championship game, you're not making the playoffs. They expanded the playoffs, it's a little different. But when you can't beat the game, win the games you have to win, you got to go. Doesn't matter if you can get yourself get there. If you're the Bengals in a situation much like the Buckeyes, you expect the championship. You have a Hall of Fame quarterback playing like an MVP, and you're 4-8. If you can't win the first 2 games of the season, you dig that hole. This is the thing, and this is big. This is really big. We talk about winning the big games. You talk about winning these games, you have to. Remember Marvin Lewis, king of losing the big games. Bengals didn't know what a primetime game looked like for a long time. That was a win, at least. And in the Marvin Lewis era, we knew he couldn't win the big games. We knew he wasn't the coach for that. He knew he could win games during the regular season. He could get the Bengals in position, but he couldn't win the big games. And there was a lot of talk that Marvin Lewis overstayed his welcome in Cincinnati. Loved what he brought to Cincinnati. Loved, he had to say, it's a great time to Cincinnati. But you look at Marvin Lewis in his last 3 years in Cincinnati. Remember, not the brightest of times, the worst stretch he had in Cincinnati. It was 12-11 at home, 12-11-1. Mind you, 6-10, 6-9-1, 4-12, bad seasons. 4-11, bad seasons. Doesn't matter, bad seasons. And he was still winning your home games. In the NFL, your home games are so big. You have to win your home games. The good teams make it a threat for the road team to come into their place and win. They cannot win the home game. You're going to have 8 or 9 every year. If you can't go 500, if you can't win 6 of 9, 6 of 8 at home, you're not going to ever get to be in that position to be. You're always going to be playing the underdog. If you can't win the first 2 games of the season, or at least one, you're always going to be the underdog. This season stands out. It finally came back and bit the Bengals. Zach Taylor did not have his team ready. Period. That's on your coach. If you're in the AFC Championship game back-to-back seasons and you still struggle to win the first 2 games of the season, that is completely on your coach not having you ready. And you think, if you win the game against the Patriots like you should have, really you could have argued they could have won the first 2 games, but you should have beat the Patriots. Now you're 5-7. Now you look at the Bengals schedule. Maybe all the pressure in the world isn't on you last week against Pittsburgh. Maybe you win that, you're 6-6. Regardless, you're 5-7. You can win out. You got a Pittsburgh team that's probably not going to play its starters that final week of the season. You just got to beat the Broncos. You're still in a position to make the playoffs and go on a run. But because you finally got caught and you got bit by that bug, if you cannot win the first 2 games, you're not winning your home games. When you're 1-5 at home, you're not winning the games inside the division. It's finally catching up to him. When Joe Burrow and company can carry this team and you find ways to win games, you don't notice it. You kind of brush it under the rug. You say, we're still making the playoffs. It's okay. But when you miss playoffs, this stuff sticks out. And the division is so big. Again, that was the Michigan comparison. This is going to be a good division. As long as Harbaugh and Tomlin are coaches in this division, they're going to be coached for a long time. You are always going to be playing in the toughest division in the league. They're always going to have dominant defenses. They're always going to find ways to win football games. They're going to win 9-10 games every season, minimum. I mean, Tomlin proved that with Mitch freaking Trubisky and Justin. These quarterbacks, he's proven he can do it. It's just going to keep happening. If you can't find ways to go 3-3 or 4-2 against the division, it's going to always be an uphill climb. You're never going to be able to put yourself in a position to win the division and give yourself home field advantage in the playoffs. Home field advantage, which again is ever so important to the good football teams, because the good football teams go 7-1, they go 6-2, they go 8-0 at home, and then they go 4-4 on the road. Statistically, just looking at numbers like that, 6 years now, Zach Taylor's had a chance to figure it out. I don't really care about anything else. Again, we can micromanage every game. This play call, that's questionable. This is questionable. And I have liked some of the stuff Zach Taylor's done on the field. He's a lot more aggressive than Marvin Lewis. The team comes out ready to play in primetime. Again, he's got the team more prepared to win the big games. We've seen that with the playoff success, the runs, and that's why you give this guy the longer leash, because he's had playoff success. In Cincinnati, we know what it's like to have 0 playoff success, so you give him the longer leash. But now you look and say, how much is that Zach Taylor and how much is that just Joe Burrow being Joe Burrow, finding ways to win games? And more importantly, you got to go back to what's fact right now. Can't win in the division, can't win at home, can't win to start the season. You don't play the division to start the season, you're 0-2. Now you got 6 games against the division. You're going to go 3-3 at best, 2-4 probably. Now all of a sudden you're 2-6. Before anything else happens, you're 2-6. 2-5. 3-5. You want to be a team with some that's no wiggle room. You're at 3-5. You have 1 loss, maybe 2 to work with the rest of the season. Injuries happen. Crazy things happen, but right off the bat, you're putting yourself in that kind of hole every single year with Zach Taylor. And at some point in time, you have to say, hey, right now this team's got a lot of holes. But this team's also had a team where Joe Burrow was on a rookie deal, Jamar Chase was on a rookie deal, T. Higgins was on a rookie deal, and they had some guys. And Zach Taylor still didn't have this team ready to win against the division. He didn't have them ready to win to start the season. To me, that's not going to change. He's had his opportunity for 6 seasons. And if you're the Bengals right now, you have a golden opportunity to kind of go for a regime change here, kind of shake things up. And don't get caught holding on to the past as much as I kind of hold on to the past, saying, well, that's the thing you worry about. What if we go move on and you get a coach that comes in that just doesn't get any playoff success? Frankly, I don't think that's ever going to happen. As long as Joe Burrow's your quarterback, there is a lot to be said about who that man under center is, the confidence he instills in the rest of his team. And I think that was the primary driver. When you have Joe Burrow back there, your team thinks you're going to win. There's a big difference in a team that completely has full belief in their quarterback carrying them to victory in any big game. So you get behind you like, that's all right, we'll come back. That's all right, we'll come back. I think that's more on your offense in their abilities, your quarterback in their abilities more than our coach a lot of times. Don't get me wrong, the coaching is huge. Game planning is huge. But some of that confidence does come from who's under center. And I do think that the next coach that comes in can continue to instill that confidence and continue to win games. The interesting thing about the 18-24 also is you start to wonder if Zach Taylor's a one-trick pony. And by that, we mean his ultimate way to fire his guys up and get them ready is saying, hey, we're the underdogs. They don't think we can beat them. And then once you're at that point where you're up here, you're not the underdogs, you're the favorites. All of a sudden, what's that motivating factor? What's that game plan? What are you preaching? What are you telling the choir? What are you teaching these guys? A lot of them talk about the hard knocks and the way you see the difference in the way each coach handles their teams, handles individual players, and how much different Zach Taylor is to Mike Tomlin and company. I have to say, 3 weeks ago, I would have said, hey, let's trust Zach Taylor. Let's give him time to figure this out. Look what he's done. But you look what he's done. Ever so awkwardly. Ironically, you look what he's done and said, how do you overlook this? I would love to see Zach Taylor grow and improve. I would love to see Zach Taylor be successful. I would love to see him stay in a Bengals uniform. I guess uniform still counts. But how do you overlook this stuff? It's been 6 years. And it's consistently bad at home. One good season at home. Consistently bad against the division. Horrendously bad to start the season. You're the Bengals. You're Joe Burrow. Your offense. Look how good this offense is. You should have came into this season 2-0. At least 1-1. And you should have won the games that you should have won, but you found ways to lose them. You found ways to lose close games. There was situations where you said, why are we running the football 3 straight times when we're kicking field goals with McPherson? And this is the next question. How long has McPherson been hurt? And why were we putting him in position to kick these field goals? He was hurt before this. There's no question about that. You waited till the season was over, and all of a sudden the Bengals had these guys going on the shelves, getting some surgeries, getting some injury. They're talking about injuries coming out, fix them. You have to wonder, and I have to expect McPherson was dealing with that groin injury. How long? We don't know. It didn't just come up, though. The way he's been struggling this season, that's been irritating him. Call me ignorant for assuming that, but just the fact that the season's over, now all of a sudden these guys' injuries are coming up, that's not a coincidence. Nonetheless, I'd like to hear the opposite side. We've kind of talked about why we keep Zach Taylor in past videos, but I'd like to kind of hear the opposite side, where the fans are staying right now with saying, this is why we keep Zach Taylor. What are the reasons we keep Zach Taylor opposed to trying anybody at coach? Honestly, I've said this before. I think your number one coach right now for the Bengals, the perfect coach you have is you get a guy that is a defensive mastermind, that isn't closed-minded, that's open to saying, hey, Joe, what do you want to do on offense? Do it. And you get this guy that's a defensive mastermind that knows how to bring in talented defensive players. He knows how to develop defensive players, because when you have that combination with a Super Bowl, with an MVP, with a Hall of Fame quarterback, you win a lot. That's why it worked with the Patriots. Belichick was a defensive mastermind who knew how to let his quarterback be his quarterback. Now, Andy Reid's a little different. He's more of an offensive mastermind. And that's worked for them in Kansas City because Spagnuolo and the way they've been drafting. They got a scouting department that's through the roof, ridiculously good, bringing in all these rookies that are performing. But I look at long-term like that and say, in the Bengals system, in their coaching setup, their organization would like, let's be cheap on a scouting department. Well, that means you got to have a head coach that knows his stuff on the defensive side of the football. And, you bring it back. If Marvin Lewis was here with Joe Burrow, and I wonder. You think they've won a Super Bowl? Because Marvin Lewis's biggest problem was the big games, but I don't think Joe Burrow was going to care. I don't think Joe Burrow was going to let them big games be a problem. And you remember Marvin Lewis, I think with Zach Taylor, I've always said fireable offense. The one thing I've always said for 6 years that's a fireable offense is the fact that you have the biggest brained quarterback in the NFL right now that knows how to pick apart defenses and read defenses better than anybody. But for some reason, you continue to hold that play sheet in your hand and think you're above him. Let the man get to the line of scrimmage with 25 seconds left, and you let him do his thing. Again, a coach that comes in, that they need like a Peyton Manning style coaching situation where they just let him do his thing, but then you need a great defensive mastermind. Give him a defense and he's going to bring you Super Bowl. If you give Joe Burrow a top 5 defense, he's going to win a Super Bowl every year. Let him do his thing. That's been my concern with Zach Taylor. It feels like even Taylor hasn't let him do his thing because this guy's getting killed. What's the number one counter to a bad offensive line? Up tempo, no huddle. Where's the defense done? They can't get off the field, or their edge rushes are worn down. For some reason, he's refused to do that. And he just continues to let Joe Burrow get hurt and injured and hit and hit and hit. Lots of questions. It's that, and it's the numbers. It's the records in the division, the home games, the start of the season. Those two things. For me, you can get rid of Zach Taylor right now, no questions asked. I'd like to hear the rebuttal. Nonetheless, love y'all's thoughts. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.